Hello, RP people. My name is Santa, and welcome to the very first episode of Role Playing as Smart People, the podcast where we discuss all things tabletop like we know what we're talking about. What you can expect from us in future episodes is a conversation about systems, mechanics, news, and mechanical rants on the things we have way overthought. Wow, I've already screwed this up, but let's keep going. On this episode, uh, we're just going to actually keep it nice and simple, and we're just going to talk about a little bit about who we are. So the first person I'd like to introduce is a friend of mine. His name is Mr. Finder. Mr. Finder, can you please tell me about yourself and how you got into a tabletop?
Yeah, I am an old man, 50 years old now. I got into tabletop RPGs by watching my brothers play back in the mid to late 80s. They played Dungeons and Dragons, and I watched and was entertained by the stories, and eventually started DMing my own games for my friends um, as early as the fifth grade, and even then started dabbling in making our own games. So um, been doing it for a little bit.
Oh, nice. Was that first edition that you actually started with, or was it something else?
It was first edition. I have a first edition basic blue book. I've lost the expert editions, and then that, of course, went straight into AD&D first edition. So, and I had most of those books. I sold them because they were just taking up space on my bookshelf, and I needed room for other games that I'm going to play since I don't really do much D&D any longer.
I hear you on that one. D&D, it's good at first, but like, not to already insult a lot of the audience, but D&D, I find it just gets a little bit burning up. You burn out of it a little bit quickly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Although, the thing that it was a fun system for the time, but even then, back in the early 80s, started getting into more things like Boot Hill or Star Frontiers and Gamma World and some other systems with different mechanics.
So up next, who I'd like to introduce, he's a man who's actually been in the industry for quite a little while, and he's probably the person who has to roleplay the least about being smart. Up next is Scott.W. Tell us about yourself, Scott.
I'm not so sure about that statement. That's bold strategy, Cotton. But yeah, so I've been gaming since, oof, man, early '80s, like '82, '83, somewhere there, maybe '84. Huh, yeah, I'm old as well. But I started with a buddy of mine's older brothers played, and they wouldn't let us play because we were like sixth graders. But dude had borrowed, right, air quotes, the module A1 Slave Pit to the Undercity. But we didn't have the dice, and so we just rolled a bunch of six-siders to approximate a 1 to 20 roll, which, whatever. I mean, hindsight's kind of neat. We already made our own system back in the day. And then eventually they gave us the Little Brown books because they thought it was for babies, since they were all now into AD&D all of a sudden. And so that's it, and it just took off from there. And yeah, I've been, mostly a GM, and I think I've played maybe a handful of times as an actual player. And that's it. And yeah, I design professionally now.
So what have you designed?
Oh man, let's see. The first Vanity Ego project was Oubliette Sorcery and Reavers, which is a kind of a grimdark fantasy. Not grimdark like you wear mascara and you're gonna sit and lament the world. It's just we made it magic means something to the caster, and how you do your magic depends on how far you're willing to go. And then everything else kind of falls in line with that. And we just launched Neon Blood, which is our old school Renaissance version of cyberpunk, but like with everything that I do, there's a twist to it, and it's not just boring, basic D&D where fighters are replaced by, a soldier of fortune. There's actually a lot of cool components to it, and for that one, our design was to make hacking and firefights able to operate simultaneously at a table and not have everyone bored as hell like they usually are in cyberpunk or Shadowrun. And then we're just working on other products now that we're going to be producing here shortly.
Oh, nice. Well, just from my own personal experience and reading through games like Cyberpunk and what's that really famous one? The one with all the goblins. I'm already forgetting the name.
Shadowrun?
Shadowrun, that's the one. Shadowrun. I remember trying to actually read through that thing and getting to the point where it's all talking about the internet and everything, and I just conked out. Like I couldn't even do it. I just said I'm never playing a hacker in my lifetime.
Yeah, you're not alone. It's pretty obtuse.
So as for myself, I have the least experience out of all you guys. I didn't start when I was in sixth grade or anything. I got into it actually. It was a little begrudgingly. Um, my buddy Jeremy, if you're listening, Jeremy, thank you for getting me in this. It's kind of gotten me where I am right now. But he kind of just told me to come and just give it a try. And he was running a custom system on GURPS, which, if anyone knows GURPS, it's a really old kind of game, but you can do almost everything with it. And he made his own custom magic system. And I really wasn't like wanting to, because I just thought it's not for me, which is kind of stupid because I was even a drama kid as like when I was 14, 15. But he just told me, hey, just try it out. If you don't like it after a day, don't come back for the next session. But I kind of got hooked, and since then I've just been reading every single system I possibly can. That game was fun, but it didn't last too long because unfortunately it was just around the time where 5e for D&D was popping out, and we were all gung ho on trying to hop over to that system, and that's what everyone pretty much stayed playing afterwards.
You know what I like about GURPS is their source books are phenomenal. I grab source books just as like idea fodder for my own games at times. Like, oh, I'm going to do Cyberpunk. Let's check out their cybernetics supplement. So it's like I love the GURPS source books.
Oh, and there's one for honestly everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Martial arts, there's that. Like, I'm pretty sure if you want one about fighting unicorns, I don't know if it's out there, but it probably is. Like, I
Oh
have
yeah,
never.
they definitely have it. Yeah.
Oh my god, I hope they
Well,
do. Like,
well, that's the thing with Steve Jackson, right? The whole point behind GURPS was they tested every rule with not just verisimilitude, but their combat was done out in a backyard, and they'd beat the tar out of each other with sticks to approximate, like, oh, what would it take to actually hurt somebody? What does it take to make contact with someone? And yeah, it's how it whole got started. So the level of research provided on a lot of their source books is fairly phenomenal.
really, I actually didn't know that. That's really cool. So
Yep.
they actually tested out these weapons and all these mechanics in the real world to see how they could be emulated.
Yeah, as far as you could, right? You wrap foam around a broomstick and you get garbage can lids. I mean, the same thing we all do as kids, right? I remember, I
Mhm.
mean, this sounds terrible in hindsight. I don't know how I survived, but we used to make bows and whatnot and try to, put a tennis ball on the end of it or whatever, and just be like, "Hey, I'm going to shoot you, and it's probably not going to hurt you, but if the arrow continues, because you don't understand, force
Oh,
momentum and everything, so
I get you. For me, although I was a '90s kid, so we were a lot more bubble wrapped. So for us, we were just making we're making crossbows out of. I don't know if you guys know what Knex is, or if it's even an American product or anything like that. But like, if they're these little sticks that you stick together with these other kind of connections, and then we'd put rubber bands and try and tighten it to the point where it's like you could literally launch something, and if it was into drywall you could actually pierce it, and it was like that was a kid's toy. It was fun. Yeah, no, good childhood, good childhood.
you know.
So here's actually a question where I've in kind of like us talking about this podcast. uh I didn't actually know all the information, but how we all met, and I did not know that Mr. Finder and Scott knew each other before. Well,
New
let's get
of.
to this. New of. Let's get to this story. Scott, do you want to take over since you kind of brought us all together?
Actually, I don't. Do you want to start the story and then I'll jump in?
Sure, I can start the story.
I want to hear. I want to hear how awesome it was. I have to have my ego pumped up before I jump in.
It was several years ago. I can't even remember when it was. I don't even remember if it was associated with like an online con of any sort, but um, there was a looking for players for this. I swear it was Savage Worlds. I know you think it was 5e, but I remember it as Savage Worlds. So 50-year-old brain, one of us is right, one of us is wrong. I don't care who it is, but it was fun. It was special ops type characters um, doing a Halo jump, and uh, things go wrong immediately in the game, and we end up having to bail out of the plane earlier than anticipated. We land in this jungle. There's some sort of something out there. We never got a glimpse of what it was that shredded the plane, and so we just know that there's something in this jungle. We failed all of our parachute rolls, like all the rolls that we had to do to even be close to one another. So it took us like half a day or something like that for the characters to actually hook up. And it's just two guys. I mean, it was like me and one other guy that were players with Scott GMing, and somehow we end up finding one another, and we made it through combat successfully, with some creatures, only to find out that there was some supernatural crap going on that we weren't expecting, because it was a modern uh, sort of game, Spec Ops. It was a lot of fun. Had a great time, and uh, so that was the first. It was a one shot game. We only played it once, and
By accident.
yeah, yeah. I wanted to continue it, but schedules, of course, never worked out. And then the other guy that was playing, don't know what happened to him. Actually, I do know what happened to him, because I was still in contact with him up until recently,
Oh,
in a different aspect. That it was working on the Savage Worlds compendium for Roll20 is where he ended up as well.
oh, cool.
But yeah, so that game was only like 2 or 3 hours, but it was a lot of fun. And then I saw the thing for Eberron, and I was like, "Oh, cool!" And I think I know this guy.
Oh, my second love in life, Eberron. Yeah, it's pretty close. So it was 5e. I pulled the game up just because I was like, man, I remember having to do something weird for everyone to make everyone kind of get in the mood, right? And so we had um the character classes. I designed them, but I told you guys, hey, look, like a medic is just a rogue. The terp is going to be a rogue. An operator will use the berserker, right, or the barbarian stuff. Um, and then yeah, there's only the two of you anyway. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a 5e game because it's the only one that's still up that I have. So I was like, hey,
Yeah,
maybe.
I went looking for it and I couldn't find it myself. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, but yeah, it was the intro to my Task Force Raven idea, which I still have earmarked to get back on at some point. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. But yeah, and there's these guys really took it in stride. The biggest thing about so what I did was I really took a chance. That's usually a tisk on a lot of gaming forums. Is I got a bunch of players to get well, a bunch K2. Um, we had some interest, but other people bumped out. But I got players together under the auspices that they were going to play special forces operators with a specific mission. And then I got them in the airplane, and we had sound effects, and yeah, all hell broke loose, and they had to evac the bird, and that's when all hell started happening to them, really. And it was something weird was going on. They hit the ground running. Yeah, they had to find each other because I was using a sound bite when they got close to each other through your search rolls and whatnot, right? If you
Oh,
remember,
that's
and
right.
the
Yeah.
squawking radio, and I'd get it louder and louder the closer you got to each other, so you'd know if kind of colder, warmer kind of thing. And then the interference on the radio channel in general was also part of it, and you thought you were picking up the rest of your team, and then you met your first creature. And yeah, and so that's the real tisk moment is deceiving players. You do take a big chance of someone to being like, hey, I thought we were playing modern special forces, and I think 99% of gamers are okay with the idea of playing Delta Force operators who get thrown into some weird land of uh monsters. I haven't seen it ever go awry, but there are a lot of people who take umbrage with that.
Yeah, for me that comes down to having to trust the GM. Um, I didn't know you, so I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. And people who play D&D 5e, if they're not comfortable playing in a Delta Force type game like this with supernatural elements, even though it's modern, I'd be surprised, just because 5e itself is so much fantasy.
Yeah, fair point. And then yeah, then I listed the Eberron game because that was Savage Worlds. because I love Eberron, and I have all the books for Eberron, and I even have my name in a couple of the more modern books for Eberron. I actually was on the team that was helping design it, and then yeah, so it's really cool. Then I met these guys, and you know, I'll let Santa decide if he wants to tell about how our four players went down to not four players.
No,
Maybe an
honestly,
episode on problem players.
oh god, it was actually a lot of fun. Like we started off and it was me, Finder, and this other guy who what did he go? He went as Crispy Burnt Man. I'm pretty sure that was his name. And also we had this other character whose name I don't really recall, but to be honest, I don't really think he was really an important part of the story in the end. Uh, so we started off in we started off playing, and I remember just like chatting with everyone. And first thing I thought, like, because we're just tossing out these random things, I was playing this character called Tog the Goblin. I stole a carpet because I hid under it and then tried to crawl away as the NPC and the other players in total view just kind of saw me crawling away in this blue. I just remember it's a blue carpet, and then I tried to sell the carpet, and then I used that carpet to try and get onto a boat. And this whole time we have Finder, your character, who's like this giant metal machine who is very holier than thou. Well, not holier than thou. That's I think the wrong word to use. But he was very kind of like he was on a mission from his deity, everything like that. And when you were playing your character and I remember you jumped out of a window to try and land onto a ship, and it could have easily just been like a one shot kill, but you just got lucky with your dice rolls. And the whole time that you were talking and playing, I was just my play style, I was gravitating more towards you, and I found my character, I couldn't help but try and put a connection between this weird goblin who doesn't like authority towards this what's that class that what's the race that you're
Warforged.
the Warforged. That's it, Warforged.
Yeah.
You're playing the Warforged, and although you're supposed to be, very organized and everything like that, I couldn't help but just trying to hop into your scenario. And then we had I'm just going to call him Crispy for right now. And Crispy, this is his first ever game. Like he has never
Mm.
played one before in his lifetime, and he was I I think honestly because it was his first time, it was probably almost better because he was just willing to try and do everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he created like a big boss enemy by accident because there's this. I'm trying to remember, Scott. It was like a vial of goo, or it was like a tentacle. What was
So
it?
that was, yeah, the Violet Goo, like where he really got going with his craziness was when you guys had crashed in the Lazar Principalities, right, on your way to a specific area, and you had fought another set of folks who were sent after you guys essentially.
Hmm.
And yeah, he killed he stabbed this thing, and he's a younger player, and so he's willing to Saturday cartoon it with he doesn't understand the inherent danger that anyone who's gamed for more than a year understands.
Yeah, and so
You
he
know.
like decided to test out the goo on a dead body of the captain of like a pirate ship,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then he's just like, oh, and I'm pretty sure like you said some kind of effect that happened, and you just this
Yeah, because it was actual it was the captain slash helmsman,
yeah.
right, of the ship, of the enemy ship, which means it was a dragon marked half elf, so automatically had the power of dragon mark flowing through it, and
Hmm.
then this experimental vial that was being sought after. Yeah, and it was on the fly. It was just like, oh, this kid really is like anxious and having fun, and so I was like, cool, let's now build an enemy who's going to be hunting the party down. And
Yep.
that's really where you guys got your first, true nemesis.
And it was hilarious because he kind of put it in his ear, and then you said like you saw this thing like like go in, and then if I'm recalling, the black veins kind of like started popping, and Crispy, all he does, he's like, "Oh, that's weird," and then he doesn't bother to tell any of us other players, and he just walks away from the body like nothing happened, and like we're just sitting there and like, "Are you going to tell us?" Like I forget who, but one person, I think it was that character that shall not be named.
Yeah.
He was like, "Are you going to tell us about it?" And he's like, "No, I don't think so. I think he might be a little embarrassed for doing it, so he's not going to tell." And we're like, "Oh, we just busted out laughing at this."
Oh man.
Oh, that was so good. And yeah, essentially with the drama with the player that shall not be named, um, he felt like Scott was being unfair because he was handing out. If anyone who's listening to this is familiar with Savage Worlds, you get things called bennies, which are essentially free rerolls, or depending on what system and everything you do, they could also have alternate effects and everything like that. But they're pretty much rerolls for anyone, like for simplicity's sake. And he was kind of mad that Scott wasn't handing him any when he saw that me and Finder and Crispy were all getting bennies, and he brought it up in confrontation, and I just remember you said it. It's like, well, you're trying to play the game. You're not trying to actually play the character, and you didn't see any miraculous things that your character was doing. Like I remember Finder, he the reason why that blimp crashed, or that the airship crashed, was because you decided to again jump off of a moving ship and jump onto a smaller moving ship when you don't have any flight skills, and then you somehow managed to ram that ship into the flying like apparatus of that bigger ship, which caused it to crash. And this is all like, this is why, Scott, you're probably my favorite DM that I played with. Not trying to, you know,
Thanks.
but you just decided to go with it, and you're like, yeah, it blew up, and now it's listing, and it crashed into your ship, and so we all ended up like crashing, and all the innocent people on there who died, which, and the goo and all these things, it's just like this crazy catastrophe that happened. But like, and the other player, he's just like, well, I want to do this, and at one point, I think it was shortly after, like, I was making some he got pissed off at me because he told me to watch Crispy, because Crispy was
Yeah.
just chatting with a guy at the bar, and because my goblin doesn't like authority, I decided to leave and go across the street to get a cup of coffee and read the paper,
Yep.
while he was telling the story about all that we're doing, and the ruins that we're going to, and the treasures that we might find, as these guys are just kind of listening and just taking note.
Just gave it all away.
Yeah, pretty much. He gave away our entire plan of what's going on. And during that time, like I ended up just kind of like deciding, hey, I'm going to go find a library, and I ended up stumbling upon like some information that we can use. And so I brought it forward, and that guy was like, nope, pretty much just nope, we're not using it. We're doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it was in the middle of a fight. He's like, I want those bennies now, and you're like, no. And he just literally said, okay, I'm done, and he just left.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. That was
But that was a
awesome.
fun fight scene too, though. I mean,
oh
that
yeah,
fight
yeah.
scene
It
was
was in the
awesome.
middle of the fight scene, and then didn't we use his body as a shield, or we threw his
Yes.
body at something, and then yeah, and I remember we tried to like role play it like, why did his character just die? And because he was a secret agent, you're just like, yeah, he
Yeah.
was a secret agent, and he decided to turn on you, or something like that. I kind of forget, but either
Yeah, I
way,
forget too. I
yeah,
was kind of trying to maintain my decorum. He had to, yeah, it's just I'm not the one, and I'm not the normal person who plays role playing games with my
yeah,
background. So, it just
yeah. He wanted to be Neo from the Matrix when
yeah,
really he was
basically.
yeah, he was just a halfling who wanted to re-roll everything.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sir, if
Anyway,
you're listening.
don't care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll pay your mom's gas money to Memphis. That's what I tell everyone.
Oh, oh, that's a burn. So anyways, let's move on to the next one. So this one's a little bit more of a like I, things change, but I find overall people usually have like a favorite RPG. So like, what is your guys' favorite RPG that no matter what you can always kind of hop back to and either just read the book, or you'd always like to play it?
You want to take this one first, Scott?
Yeah, it's easy, which is it's really weird since I do nothing but design games. It's actually Spirit of 77. So I love that stupid game so much. But it is the most high octane, high speed fun that I have while gaming. It's even faster played than Savage Worlds. It's set in the 70s Glock movies, so if you can enjoy stuff like Shaft or Dirty Harry combined with Charlie's Angels, and throw in some A Team and some what would be the X Files or whatever, you're gonna enjoy the hell out of that game.
So it's like pretty much like a mashup of a lot of TV shows, but somehow it works out well.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely it's powered by the apocalypse, and so it really depends a lot on player engagement, which it is what it is. But if you have the right GM, um, that helps the player engagement, and it's really is just continually asking questions of the players instead of waiting for them to do something. Like a lot of games get real boring. But this is like, all right, you guys are in Mr. Chang's grocery store. All right, what's going on? Why are you in Mr. Chang's grocery store today? And you just start going around the table doing that, and then you're like, all right, on 3, 2, 1, you hear the sound of gunfire, and then you just start going into it, and people are like, what the hell is happening? So, but you guys are, you two are used to that out of me anyways. It's sort of how I run
Yeah,
everything. So,
if anyone ever gets a chance to play with Scott, just like don't really expect what you think you're going to expect. He likes to throw these curveballs that you're just not going to really think of.
but are they fair curveballs? That's always the question.
I've not had a problem with any of the curveballs so far.
No, I find failure quite fun, so I like it.
I like challenging players, not their characters.
Well, and like going back to that Eberron game, one of like the curveballs that you throw are things like, we're now in the past, and this is what's
Mm.
happening. Why are you guys? Why are you on this trek? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I guess this is why I'm on this trek, and it forces you to think, but it also gives some background to what's going on. And so there were a couple kind of cut scenes that you did throughout that campaign that kind of shed light on the present while giving us something to think about from the past that may inform the present as well. And so the curveballs, I don't think have ever been unfair, and they've
Yeah.
always been entertaining. So
Well, there you go.
Well, there is that one time that he wrote out a bunch of clues and then he expected us to try and remember stuff. Uh, I felt like that was very unfair because we kind of have the attention span of a goldfish.
And hence the Roll20 secondary version of the game was born, so you could have your clue manifest, your conspiracy your conspiracy
Uh,
charts.
yeah, like the essentially that campaign we were talking about earlier, it ended up becoming he decided to put out like a murder mystery kind of part where we got these kind of clues, we got all these thoughts, and we had to try and find the killer of like this professor who we were all fond of and friends with. And it was I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, but
So it was like 10 sessions, right, of you guys trying to your first session is the professor was kidnapped out from underneath you.
mhm.
And then you guys spent a lot of sessions fighting your way through, it's basically pulp adventure, right? So in Eberron. So you spent all these sessions fighting your way to your professor. You ended up rescuing your professor. I think you may have done one side job for your professor once you got her back to Morgrave University in Sharn. And then as when I gave you guys the note was like, hey, I need to speak to you, come to this place at this hour and we'll talk. And then as you guys got there is when you had uncovered that, she had in fact been brutally murdered.
Yeah, and
And that's
I
what started
even
it.
yeah, and I even remember like after that session we were talking and we are asking, it's like, what would have happened? Because we were asking, like thinking to ourselves, should we get there like maybe like 15 minutes early? Should we be fashionably late? Uh and we asked you afterwards, like, well, what would have happened if like we came early? And you're like, well, if you came early, you would have seen her being murdered. If you
Yeah.
came late, you wouldn't have even seen the was it an elf?
It was dark. It was drow. Yeah,
It
you
was a
guys
drow,
came in
yeah.
right as they were ransacking the room. So there's 3 points you could come in on, and you guys came in on that. And that was the thing is I could have just started it with like, hey, your best friend, the professor, which none of you really know or give a shit about. Sorry, care about. Uh, that's just not a good way of doing it. So I had to build
Mm.
up. I had to build the NPC up to where you guys would at least have some kind of reaction, even if it was just like, man, I almost got murdered. I jumped off multiple airships. for this. You know, this professor, now someone killed her. Oh, not today, ISIS. You know, I had to build those motivations in right for you. So hope, and it seemed like it worked. I mean, even if it didn't, at the end of the day, you guys are great players because you're like, oh, okay, this is the direction that I think this goes, and so what the I believe button. I don't know if you care, if you actually felt motivation to get even for her or to solve the murder, or if you were just, you know, like, okay, cool story, let's do this, let's solve this.
Speaking for myself, as a person, I didn't care. My character did, and that's the important thing.
There you
Yeah,
go,
and
right? See?
I think that's exactly it. Like as a person, like I didn't care,
Yeah.
but I knew my character would care, and I think I think a lot of people when they're like playing these games, they try and think it's like, well, I don't really care because like at the end of the day, like it's a fictional character, but
Right.
you put on these like concepts where we have to think how would our player react, our character react, and that's what makes this kind of stuff fun because I had to think, oh, how would Tog the Goblin react? And part of him was hungry because he liked eating corpses, and the other part
That's
of him was sad because it was someone who was actually the same height as him, which is not really that common.
that's right, because she was a gnome,
Yeah,
if I
she
recall
Yeah.
was.
correctly. Yeah, she was a gnome. So, yeah. So anyway,
Yeah, no,
So,
it was good. What about you, Finder? What's your
the
favorite RPG?
right now, my favorite RPG is probably Savage Worlds because I don't have a lot of time to learn new systems, and so with my friends that I have gamed with for decades now, we're all old people. We all have day jobs. We just don't have time, and we like playing fantasy. We like playing sci-fi. We like playing post-apoc. We like playing horror. And so, without having to learn a new game system every time we want to switch genres, we all just kind of gravitated to Savage Worlds. So it's my favorite system for that reason. But there are other games that I just absolutely love the system. Like I love the Year Zero engine, Mutant Year Zero engine. Never played Mutant Year Zero, but I have played Forbidden Lands, and I love Forbidden Lands. There's a lot of really cool aspects to that. So I really am enamored by a lot of the Free League Press games. But the system I will always probably end up going to for any sort of long term game is going to probably be Savage World, just because it's convenient, it's easy, and it's one that I know very well. So
And you know what? I actually find that amazing. Like, I have trouble finding people that will be willing to play like 2 sessions together before schedules just end up making things, pretty much impossible. And yet you have like this group that you've, as you said, decades you've been able to play with. Like that's enviable by I think almost anyone who ever plays any RPGs. Like,
well, I think part of it goes back to we're an old group of friends from like we used to work together when I lived in Arizona. We all worked at the same place. We'd get together on the weekends and play. And then when we started scattering all over the globe, we're like, well, let's keep doing this, but let's do it online. And doing things online gave us even a little bit more flexibility because we're all kind of night owls, so we don't have a problem starting the game at like 10:30 at night and play until 1 or 2 in the morning. And that gives us time to be with our families on Friday night and still get together and play. And I mean, I started online role playing, let's see, I've been here for 2021, probably 22 years ago. 21, 22 years ago is when I started playing online with Open RPG, which is now more or less defunct. But that was like the first online role playing tabletop VTT that I'd ever come across. And it was a really cool way to stay in touch with my friends and keep being able to game and tell these stories that we like playing. But that VTT just didn't stay with the times. And when we found Roll20, that's when we jumped ship from ORPG to R20.
see that's dedication, especially if you like think about the fact that that was probably dial-up internet, and oh my god.
It's not that old. It was the beginning of broadband. There was some dial up still going on, and fortunately we'd all made the jump to cable. But it was like the early days of cable where you could download like Linux, but it would take 12 hours to download Linux,
Oh my
even with broadband.
I remember trying to play Diablo 2 on dial-up, and it was just we're lucky nowadays, guys. Just remember that. If you ever complaining about, oh, Steam is down for an hour and a half or anything like that, go back to dial-up. Like seriously, you will cherish every moment you have on the internet.
Not lying.
Oh yeah.
And still, we're like, oh, this is so slow. What is happening?
Oh my god, this page took 5 seconds to turn on. How is this even acceptable? Oh my god. Like, oh,
Yeah, man.
yeah.
All right, wee one nerd. What
Uh,
is your favorite game?
oh, my favorite game. I've actually it's funny because like I've been trying to think of this one because I'm a person who I I have I'm an obsessive person where I obsess about something for about a month and a half, and then I go into the next thing. But there's probably for system wise, I would say not to be kind of a broken record, but Savage Worlds, just because you can do almost anything. And one of
Mhm.
my favorite, I guess, settings for Savage Worlds is the Necessary Evil.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We played a game. It was actually the superheroes, not necessarily Necessary Evil, but just we used the superpowers from Necessary Evil because it's, in my opinion, it was better than the companion one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just the amount of characters you can create. Like I created this character called Bob Musket, and the whole background behind him, like it's fun because you can really do whatever you want with those things. But my whole background with him was um, essentially he didn't know he was a superhero, and we're playing this game where it was pretty much like rent a superhero, where you could rent a superhero in order to complete a task for you, something like that. And
Yeah.
he was actually going to the unemployment office that was next door, but he actually ended up in the other place, and he filled out his thing as unemployed Bob because he didn't really think like, what do you mean? What do you want for this name? Like he didn't understand. So he wrote himself in as unemployed Bob, and he all his powers were towards being so unlucky that everyone around him would be just as unlucky. And the DM who we're playing with, she ended up at one point a plane fell out of the sky, and it was the only way she could think of figuring out how this person wouldn't kill me. So a plane fell from the sky and landed on top of this person, and that was the only way we could figure out how my character shouldn't have died in that situation.
Very
Like,
nice.
yeah, and then I created a super powered Roomba that was essentially think you guys ever see that movie Rubber?
Yes.
Yeah, think of
No.
Rubber with psychic powers, but also a vengeance to not only clean up the streets realistically, but also metaphorically. And so I think that system, just because I can really let my creativity go loose and just have do whatever I want, no matter how ridiculous it is, and people just sit there and go, you know what, that's a good idea.
So that is the one thing about you that is interesting is you're the gonzo player, but not like the negative gonzo player, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, you will play. It's not, you don't do the against type trope or anything nonsensical, but you're willing to just have fun with it. And I don't know how to describe it other than, it's you're not an ass about it. It just makes things a little more interesting. Like your goblin, you devoured flesh willingly. It was a goblin thing. There was a holdover from your people, but it was like, oh, I do it in secret. And then,
Mhm.
like we talk about with this, I mean, hell, even some of the games you guys have tested for me, there's always a peculiarity about your character that is just slightly off of, what someone could expect. And it's actually neat because if you get in the mindset of trying to plan kind of vanilla characters or, the plot or kind of your scenario, someone like you definitely requires someone to be fast on their feet to make it interesting.
Well, I appreciate it. I always thought it was like coming out. I don't like to think, oh, he's going to be this class, he's going to do that. I
Right.
like to read through everything and kind of see what sounds fun to me, and or I'll have ideas where here's an interesting idea. Like I was listening to this other podcast and they're talking about how one of the biggest tropes for any D&D character is their parents are always dead. And
Yeah.
it's always like there's always so many tragedies. So I ended up
Yeah.
creating this character who his whole entire backstory, it wasn't a tragedy, but everyone has those friends where it's just like everything in their life kind of sucks, but it's not enough for you to really care. So every time someone like, oh, this happened, you're like, ah, that sucks. And I curated a character based off of just the fact that when someone's like, if I was telling the backstory, the whole thing would just be like, oh, that kind of sucks. Oh, that sucks. And that's all I wanted out of him was just to be a character that he's not necessarily a bad guy, nothing like that, but nothing happens in his life. It just kind of sucks. And that's what I like to try and do with characters is just find this little kind of idea and then expand upon it to see what the hell happens.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Thanks.
Just saying.
Um, so this is actually a perfect segue to the next question. What's your favorite character you've ever made?
Oh, you guys are gonna have to go on this one.
Oh yeah, I guess you've only well for you, how about what's your the most favorite NPC you've ever made?
Ooh, oh man! Again, you guys go ahead and go. I've been gaming for like 30 years, so it's a lot.
All right.
You go first.
All right. So actually my favorite character that I made, it goes back to my first game that I was talking about earlier. It was actually that GURPS game, right? So I was trying to figure out how to do a character and I didn't really know and I didn't want to do like, oh, this guy's just kind of edgy. This guy's kind of this. So my buddy, he was helping me create this character. And so we're going through all these things and I just knew I kind of wanted to use magic. And GURPS being the system it is, there's a lot of abilities that you can go play with, but there's also a lot of like you can take advantages and disadvantages. And I saw all these different ones, and I ended up creating this character who was young. He had a lot of scars on his body because he was trying to learn spells by himself, and he ended up failing on a spell, which kind of exploded. And ever since that point, his reflection was no longer connected to him, and in fact, it was its own entity. And sometimes it would be there, sometimes it wouldn't be there, and the whole time like he would be like this almost like devious little manipulator where he tries to be friends with everyone but at the same time he's kind of looking for a way to try and make the npcs or whatever characters fail or just pretty much rile up and cause havoc that cannot be brought back to him. And that character like it was my first one but I just have the most fond memories of like I chose like a bullwhip for my character's weapon. And
Of course you did.
yeah, he was honestly he could barely use it, and I was cornered by like the big boss orc up on top of like the city walls, and I ended up whipping him, and he's like, "Oh well, I have this table. Roll to see what you end up hitting him," and I ended up hitting him like straight in the nuts, and he fell from the wall and ended up falling, and there was like a bunch of like pikemen down there who were defending the wall. So that guy, that orc, ended up getting skewered on like one of the pikemen, and I'm just like, for some reason, that character has always resonated with me because he's a character who likes to pretend he knows everything, and tries to be very manipulative. But at the end of the day, he's kind of just almost like fluking out, which is kind of a story from my own life if you really think about it. Like even meeting you guys, it's really just a fluke, a massive fluke. And I don't know, that character has always stuck with me as one of my most favorite characters. What about you, Finder?
For me, it's a toss up between three, and so I'll be very brief on them. One was this barbarian character. This was an old D&D game that a friend of mine was DMing. An old D&D game, barbarian. His name was Thornock. His half brother unbeknownst to both of them at the time, was a half orc named Abraxas, and uh, he just went completely insane because he kept dying and kept coming back to life. He kept getting resurrected, and so he got to the point where he believed that his god turned out to be a goddess. Um, in his head, he was the betrothed to the goddess, and he was invincible. And so by the end, he was just walking into everything because he could not be killed, or rather, he could be killed, but death never took.
It's
And
awesome.
so he was just a really fun character to play until you get to the point where it's like, okay, this shtick is old. Let's do something else. And so then we moved on and created some new characters. Again, a D&D game. Dugan Halfbeard was a dwarf thief fighter. He and his orphanage brother, human or human brother, was he was a pure thief, and these two guys just get into so much trouble. And this was a D&D game that got converted into Savage Worlds, but there was like this honor amongst thieves between them to where we had no problem backstabbing each other. In fact, we did it quite regularly, and we would steal from one another. But if anybody else did, it's like, no, you don't mess with us. And so there's like this unity between the characters, but and part of that goes off to being a gem as well that was cursed that was a lot of fun. It was a trope that fortunately the other players ran with as well, and so we just had a lot of fun with those. And that guy eventually he got so many freaking hindrances. He was like he had this phobia from being out in the wilderness, and so I was like having to make rolls almost all the time around. Do I even get any sleep tonight? Because he's a city boy and he's in the middle of the woods, and he's got this paranoia that everything's watching him, and there's nature demons everywhere, and so he was just a lot of fun to play. But then my favorite Savage Worlds was a Savage Worlds Star Wars character who was a wannabe Jedi. He thoroughly believed that he was a Jedi, but he had like zero force capability. Everything that he did was like you, pure fluke. It was pure happenstance. And so the mechanic that the GM came up with was okay, anytime you want to use the force, it's an unskilled roll with an additional -4. So I was like at a -6 almost every single time I wanted to do something with the force, but it always worked. I mean, with the exploding die mechanic of Savage Worlds, he kept acing to the point where this was like the best scene. This guy runs around with two garbage men, and they get this contract to go collect this debris, and we don't realize it, but there's like this Jedi artifact where we're supposed to go and collect the stuff, and we end up encountering Darth Vader, and my character's like, oh, I gotta go defeat him, and he goes charging at Darth Vader in a one-on-one lightsaber duel using the Force, and his dice could do no wrong. Vader's dice could do nothing right, to where my character ended up chasing Darth Vader away. It was like the best because my force rolls were on point, and it was just a lot of fun because the two garbage men are like, he's not a Jedi, and we just discovered a third player had come in, and so we just discovered this android who's like, that guy's a total Jedi. So it was a lot of fun to play him because the GM, my brother-in-law, was like, oh man, he's gonna die, and so he kept trying to get me to leave Vader alone. I'm like, no, I can't do that. So those are probably the three favorite characters so far.
Yeah, I honestly find failure in RPGs is more fun than actually succeeding sometimes.
Of course, it's
It
character
tells a
building.
more interesting story.
Yeah. If you always win, it's just kind of, I don't know. It's weird to play a game like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's even like books and movies and all that. Nobody really likes a Mary Sue, just someone who can
Right.
do everything so well.
Yep.
Not gonna bring up any things, but maybe some of the more recent Star Wars might bring up you might shed some light on Mary Suing.
Oh man, there it goes. I mean, it's just kind of it's endemic in kind of modern fiction. Really, it's spread far and wide. Um, they want to have different kinds of stories now, and so you always have to have antagonists who can do the things, regardless, of kind of traditional tropes, which can be fun. But yeah, Mary Sue's are a pain. It is kind of boring.
Yeah, and like Mary Sue's, like they do come like let's not get too much into this topic, but like they can come in like all shapes and
Oh sure.
sizes and everything like that. And just because it's called a Mary Sue, like I just want to say, it doesn't mean that it's always like female characters. There's definitely
Uh,
male characters where it's
yeah,
just like, oh look, they did this. Oh well, look, they did that great. Like that's why, like I think Superman's probably like one of the biggest Mary Sues because at the end of the day, it's Superman. Yeah, wait, how can you really do anything wrong with Superman? He's one of the
right. Just
best.
kryptonite, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, it's crazy.
yeah. So what about you, Scott? What's your favorite NPC that you've created?
Oh man, I think it would have to be a so the character it was a her name was Marastra, and she was a female Shadar Kai, but she was a druid by training, and her whole goal was to learn this ancient ritual. And in order to do that, she knew that she needed a couple. She needs some items, right? So there were things that had to be gotten, and she could not access some of these items. But because she was able to shape change and change form as well, she essentially was the benefactor and the villain at the same time for the entire campaign. And it wouldn't be revealed until after the party had access points around the universe. Essentially, right? She couldn't access certain parts of some of the demi-planes, but the characters could, as long as they believed that they were doing the right thing and they were acting on the right consequences. And so she manipulated the entire thing. And then the final confrontation was with the party, and it ended up with a total party kill. Just because it was a lot of confusion at the table, as to like anger at me a little bit of like, well, how would you betray this? Because at one point when she's fighting him, they're like getting a glimpse of her in her true form, like, oh, this, because I use the Ghost of Mars kind of monster, so she's all slack. Because the shit Kai are, they're like, oh, I'm a goth kid, I have to cut myself to feel and that kind of thing. And so she had all this weird gothy stuff about her. But as she's fighting him every round, I would have her shift her visage so they would see one of their allies or one of the other villains that they had thought they had put down or they knew was responsible for their predicament. And that's when it was just like, oh my God, you do this to us the whole time. And I was like, yeah. You assembled all the artifacts that she needed to complete her ritual, and now you're in a lot of trouble. And so that was it. Yeah, she did total party killing everyone though. They put up a good fight with her though, but yeah, there was only 3 players, and it was brutal. But yeah, that's her. It's probably my favorite, just because of the level of manipulation that I was able to pull off at the table.
See, that's actually quite amazing that you can make, and it may sound negative, like of almost like an attribute, but making your players feel betrayed, like make them feel like you betrayed them. That's not something that's easily able to do.
No, it was good. It was a good reaction. It was unexpected. I was like, "Why are you yelling at me?" It's just, I'm not really the Shadar Kai druid. All you want to do now is kill her.
It's just a game, guys. It's just a game.
Yeah, it was good. But yeah, and I've done. I run a lot of Call of Cthulhu, and I elicit the spooky horror, and it's hard to scare players, right? And that's a conversation I'm sure we'll have with a topic. But I can imagine I can just pull emotions out of people, and so it's, I don't know, it's just a gift. But yeah, it's hard. It is hard. You got to plan it just right.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, no, that's, go ahead.
No, sorry. You finish your
Oh
sentence.
no, I was just kind of tailing off. I was like, yeah, it's just it's hard, but it's that is why I game, is to see the smiles and the spark behind someone's eyes, and they're like, oh no, I figured this out, you know. And you guys, even though I couldn't really see you guys, even online, I can hear it in your voices and how your tone shifts when you guys are realizing the clues, or you're putting things together, and you're just like, oh man. Even when you guys test systems, I can hear what works and what doesn't, and the way you respond to things.
So, have you, just out of curiosity, in that game, did you ever have like one player that kind of suspected something, but all the other players just kind of, almost said, no, 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 it definitely can't be true? Or did everyone just completely buy on to the fact that that was a good guy?
So, like everything, you're always going to have people. Yeah, they were. But what's neat is, uh, I had three. So we started with four, but we ended up having another problem player. It was not. It was a weird situation. But of the three players who remained, our one, she's a medical doctor, and so I don't know if it's just her training is to look deeper for underlying causes, but she was suspicious. But the neat thing was all three were suspicious of different people, of different NPCs, not knowing it was the same NPC, and they never were able to put that together. So it was kind of fun watching them like, no, 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 you're wrong. You're wrong because this is why this person is our benefactor, and this is why you're not tracking correctly on it. I don't know why you're suspicious. And it was like, oh man, you guys are so close. Yeah, and all the clues were there. I'm not the kind of person who's like, and wahaha, it was me all the time. If not for you kids. I mean, I leave clues everywhere. If they get close to a villain, and if they didn't search a body properly, it's like, oh, hey, this villain also has this weird marking or a scar on the same spot as your benefactor, right? Or things like that. And I leave these little clues everywhere. And so, again, I come from the older school where the a trap isn't for the character to roll against. The trap is for the player, or a puzzle is for the player to sit down and really think their way through it and be like, okay, well, how would I get around this? How do I navigate this obstacle? How do I fight this creature? Because that's a lot of old school D&D, especially the first time you encounter like a rust monster. You hit it and you watch your weapon begin to dissolve into nothing, and then you have to really figure things out, and that's how I run games. And so I'll sprinkle clues everywhere, runes. I use a lot of props at the table, and you guys kind of saw the digital props, but at the table, all that stuff would be physical handouts. I have a 3D printer, so I make things. I make runes and daggers and whatnot to put at the table. I print out maps, and you have to use like UV lighting to represent some magical source of lighting to read, a lemon juice map, things like that. So
That
That's
sounds
cool.
actually so cool. I'm kind of jealous that we don't live in the same area.
I'm a huge nerd. When I show it and people are like, what is happening? They're like, and then yeah, they get to like this. Oh my god! Then I'll make gifts for people. It's based on their characters. I'll be like, no, no, that's yours. You found the artifact, and so it's like this little tiny like gemstone, or whatever, a tiny dagger that represents something that they're like. Here's kind of what my dagger looks like. Okay, cool. Here's a tiny little Quran bit that you can hold to the table now and tchotchke it up. Things like that.
That's
Yeah,
actually so cool.
yeah. Like I said, I've been married a long time, and our daughter is grown, so I have a full-time job, and it ends, and then I get to go home and I can just nerd out because my wife is totally cool with it.
Yeah, I gotta say that's one thing is having a significant other, whether they are not they're in the thing, that's supportive of your nerdiness. I guess that's the best way
Yeah,
to put it.
yeah, that's cool. She knew what she married. She first came. Because back in the day, I thought I had a weird change where I didn't. I went through a long period where I don't like to talk about gaming at all, and I'm still kind of that way at work because a lot of people have no idea just how elevated of a nerd I am. But it's just when because you got a lot of fights back in the day, and there was a satanic panic and a whole bunch of stuff. But actually, it's not a bad topic for another episode since we're just predicting out like significant others in gaming. So it'd be kind of a good, interesting topic because there are a lot of people who have them and may or may not be super supportive. And there's a variety of reasons. Like I don't spend a lot of time doing this, but if she's going to sit down there and like knit, excuse me, or she does a lot of canning and a lot of like, well, almost prepping, but anyway, she does a lot of foods prepping and whatnot and trying out new things. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I don't have anything to do for work, so I'm going to go ahead and, make some cool stuff. Like I'm going to run a game and I have these tiny little tiles I've created that are little types of terrain. So I can put them out for the characters doing a hex explore so they can say like, oh, there's a little mountains and forest and here's where we've gone. Anyway, yeah.
So our next question on the list, this one's a nice simple one, but what's your tabletop bucket list? I think everyone has one of games that they want to play, but they've not been able to actually play.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've got three at the top of my list.
damn, wow.
Shoot.
Black Void is probably at the top at the moment. it is billed as a fantasy,
Mhm.
but it's got to be weird fantasy. I mean, it's just the entire concept is kind of like ancient Babylon um, gets transported to this alien realm, and
Ooh.
humanity is like on the verge of becoming extinct, and so there's this big fight for um, trying to save humanity, and it's just a really cool sounding setting, and so I really want to play Black Void sometime. Next is Coriolis, which is again Free League Press, Mutant Year Zero engine, um, but it's described as like Arabian Nights in space. So there's that, which just has a really cool. The setting itself is very evocative, and then the one that I just got in the mail yesterday, Morkborg, because that just sounds too hilarious not to play sometime.
I
I
would
think we're
agree.
gonna be trying that.
Yeah, yeah. Like you and okay, with Morkborg, I stumbled upon it. I asked, I was like, "Hey, has anyone heard of Morkborg?" And then Scott, you're like, "Oh yeah, I backed the project, everything like that." And you showed me like pictures of it, and then legitimately that day, me and Finder ended up buying it. I ended up buying it on like Amazon because it was like 2 day shipping, or else I'm ordering it from the States, which will take me like 3 months. So I didn't get a
Yeah.
PDF copy, but
Which is weird because it's actually a Swedish game. So, but I mean, I get it because you're attached to us at the hip. So,
yeah. We're your hat. That's all we are.
it
We're a hat.
is what it
But
is.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably on all three of our lists, that one right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Scott? What's on your list?
Oh man, I have played a lot of nonsense. I wouldn't. Shit, man. I'm even looking at books I have, and I'm thinking like, what have I not really ever played? And I've at least run everything. Like Morkborg is definitely there because I like the concept because it's gitchy. It's that's what I like best about it. It's very gitchy. I'll give him credit for thinking outside the box. Um, Cortex Plus, I have that, and I've heard great things about it. It's very reminiscent of kind of how Savage Worlds works, but not quite with exploding dice and whatnot. So I wouldn't mind trying that. And I don't know, man. That might be it. There's stuff I don't. It's stuff that I want to run. That's my problem as a forever GM and someone who has a lot of creative ideas. It's like there's so many adventures I want to run, but it's just getting a group together for that prolonged time period to at least get it out of my system.
Yeah, and even just to experience it. Like we
Yeah,
play, but even then, like we have scheduling conflicts and everything like that. Like I don't
yeah.
think we've actually gotten a chance to play in quite a while now, but
No, oh, it's because I keep torturing you guys to ask you, and you guys do the best thing that I could ever hope for. Is you're willing to humor me in all of the nonsense I design. I mean, you
oh yeah.
guys, so. But yeah, we definitely need to get back on a regular schedule.
Yeah. Actually, I have a list that's longer than it should be, so I'm just going to kind of cut it down to a couple of them. My first one is Paranoia. Uh,
That's a fun game.
oh, I've never played it, but I love the idea of killing you for a reason and not actually being a complete and utter dick about it.
It's basically the game designed for your personality. If that's how people want to think about you as a player, I would say you're a paranoia character transported to whatever system or genre, and not
Yeah,
in a negative way. Is that fair?
No,
that's
that's definitely fair. Like,
Finder, is that fair?
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair. Now, I will say, Paranoia is one of those games that I love playing, and I could never ref. I GM'd it back in the '80s under the second edition, and it's just not a game that I can wrap my head around for GMing. But as a player, it's a blast. Kind of like Low Life for Savage Worlds. I can't GM Low Life. It's just not a setting that speaks to me as a storyteller or as a GM. But as a player, I can totally get into Low Life, and it's a fun system to or a fun game to play. But yeah, Paranoia is awesome.
No,
Nice, yeah.
I could definitely see that because even like I was reading the rules the other day, and there's just a lot to it. Like I have the XP one, and it's like 250 pages, I think, something around that thing, and it's all in like black and white, and you're reading through this stuff, and it's so easy to kind of almost like zone out as you're kind of
Yeah.
thinking to yourself, oh, I want to be part of this group, and I want to do this, I want to do it. Like it's hard to, like, I feel like that's a perfect system for someone to run if they don't like to create cohesive stories.
Yeah.
And I don't mean
Yeah.
Yeah.
that in a I don't mean that in a bad way, but even like the rules say, it's like, you know, you want to contradict yourself, you want to do this, you want to do that. You don't necessarily just want to have the most straightforward rules. And in fact, the players shouldn't know all the rules. That's one of the rules in Paranoia. And
Yeah. Well, it's a GM reactive game, you
oh
know.
yeah.
So, well, I will tell you this: if we do get a chance to do a one shot, we could run through a one shot. So, I speak Russian fluently, and I've been trained by educators who fled the communism, to fled the Soviet Union. However, they couldn't shake their pedagogical methods in order to teach Russian. And I'm a huge fan of 1984 and Brave New World. So I would be a brutal dictator, friend computer. So.
Oh, maybe that'll be for another episode. Uh, so what is it? The other one I got on my list is East Texas University. And
Oh yeah,
yeah, and I have I know you talked about it a bit, Scott, but I
yeah,
like the concept of it because as a kid I loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
yep,
I love all those kind of paranormal shows. I love X-Files, and just something where you're starting off as these guys that really don't know that the paranormal's out there, and that's really how you're supposed to start, and just kind of almost the just the acceleration of you finding out that ghosts are real all the way through, and it sounds like a lot of fun that you're going to be these unprepared university students being thrusted into a world that you have no idea about.
yeah, yeah. So and I told you I played with the creator. It's actually we have YouTube videos of the entire game we ran, and it was just a blast to just act like college kids, like you said, who you still don't want to accept what's happening, and so you're making excuses, and then you just all the collegiate stereotypes are in play, and that makes it so much fun. Oh man, it's such a cool setting.
Yeah, no, it
I,
sounds really cool. I've honestly made probably 10 characters for it that I've never gotten to use.
well, we talked about running that too, right? Doing the I do the plot point campaign, and I don't know how we could just decide on a GM, but you definitely need to play it. I tried running it once on my own with a group of people when they showed up. It sounded cooler, I guess, in their heads. And once because I gave them everything in like a manila envelope on a clipboard with, I mean, when I told you I do prop to do props. So when they sat down and had
Mhm.
their character creation, it looked like they were registering for school. The character sheets with with the scantrons and all that jazz. And they were all like, what the hell is this? And it really
That's
was,
awesome.
it was disappointing though, because they didn't want to play. They're like, oh, this is just too much work. I thought we were going to play a role playing game. And I was like, well, what do you guys want to play then? I guess we'll just go ahead and play fantasy D&D.
Aw, that honestly sounds so cool, man. I'm so jealous. Uh, my other one, of course, I have Morkborg on the list. I also have Rippers, which is another Savage Worlds one, but it's essentially Victorian-esque monster hunting where you can take the parts out of monsters and transplant them into yourself, which I'm sorry, but who doesn't like Van Helsing? Like, it just sounds cool.
Yeah, Van Helsing meets Mary Shelley, but she's, her characters are hyper competent.
Yeah, and no, not knocking role players, but none of us are competent. We just try and pretend we are.
Oh, that is definitely a topic that gets me in a lot of trouble for a whole later time about gamers in general.
Oh, I know, I know. You're
Mm.
gonna hear in this. I know we're getting to the last couple of minutes of this, but you're gonna hear us say a lot. It's like this is for another podcast. This is for another episode. Like that. That's gonna be a theme. Call of Cthulhu 19, like the 1940s one. I always thought that would be really fun to play as.
Yeah, sure. Well, you're just listing games you want me to run. Is that what's happening right now?
Essentially, this is just my way of trying to tell you without being preachy. It's all for the podcast. There's no alternative motive, none at all.
For the next episode, we'll have a live play.
And the last one and this one, like, it's just something I really like the idea of. But the Lancer RPG, I like big robots. I like mechs. The rule book looks cool, and the robots themselves look pretty badass in the photos. So yeah, that one just looks fun.
Hey, if you go by aesthetics, I mean, you got to put Orbital Blues on there as well.
Which one? Sorry.
Orbital Blues.
Ooh, I don't know if I've ever seen that one.
That was a Kickstarter that just wrapped up not too long ago. Think of, for me, the vibe that I get from it is kind of like Firefly meets Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And the Kickstarter had an entire soundtrack that got released with the game as well. So,
oh, that's pretty cool.
That's the one genre I don't do well, I don't think, is science fiction.
See, and I always have to GM science fiction because nobody else wants to GM it. So like, dang it, that's the one that I want to play all the time. And
it's hard. And a buddy of mine's a sci-fi nerd, and I'm working on a sci-fi thing for Neon Blood, and that's the most difficult thing I've ever had to write. Because it's like, we're coming into the quasar. How do we friend computer, please tell us what to do, because by this point in time and space, I'm sure we've worked the bugs out of Siri and Alexa. So
well, you never know. We still got to do that one game we were talking about in that system.
Infinite Galaxies.
That's it.
Oh, that game is baller.
Yeah, I ended up, for my character creation, for my character, I wrote up, it was essentially a tech review for a robot.
That is true. That was beautiful. Yeah, I like a lot of PBTA games. For someone who's kind of a hard ass in real life, but I'm not all like, well, I hate Monster Hearts and the original Apocalypse World, so we'll just put that on the shelf only for a couple of features. And it's the features that anyone listening will guess. It's not me. We're not going to role play whatever you have going on in your life. That's never going to happen at my table, and you guys know that. Well, there's a lot of topics I won't touch.
Yeah.
Uh,
But yeah. I've noticed that you keep mentioning things. I'm like, oh yeah, it's PBTA as well. I really love that system. It's so freeform for me as a GM and for you as players. Be like, well, what can we do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Yeah, you guys find a chest. Well, what is it? Can I read it? Yeah, sure. Make your roll. All right, awesome. What language is it? What language does your character think it understands it to be? And then you just kind of go from there. It's just amazing. Anyway, sorry.
see, that makes me think though of Tiny D6 as well. I recently played a Tiny D6 game, which was a blast. It was Tiny
Yeah.
Frontiers, and I had so much fun in that game because almost the entire thing was like us laughing at the amazing successes when they happened and the abysmal failures when those happened. And it was a really fun, easy system.
Yep.
So I'm kind of enamored with Tiny D6 at the moment as well, just because it was so fun.
Nice. You should run us through a Tiny D6 game. Put it on the list.
I'm totally down. Actually, I just got the new Tiny D6 Kickstarter a little while ago. Was it the Mecha and Monsters?
Yeah.
Yeah, I subbed for. I ended up getting for that one a little while ago, and I'm just now waiting patiently for me to be able to see the book.
Well, as a creator, I have really bad news for your patience.
Yeah, exactly.
I swear,
my
I
God.
have some patience somewhere.
I have none. I
haven't
Man.
found it yet, but it's
Oof.
somewhere.
It's just tough right now getting
Yeah.
things out to backers, and I feel bad because I'm the kind of person who's like, I want to produce other stuff, but I refuse to release it until I've completed all of the shipment of books, and I need the books to be printed. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we should probably wrap this one up. Ironically enough, I was thinking we'd probably be through this in 30 minutes, and just for the first one, I was like thinking, hey, we'll just introduce ourselves. We'll be nice. It'll be nice and simple. We won't get anything. We won't get aggravated. We won't talk about how 5e is not that great of a system. We won't do it now.
no one
We'll
said
do
that
it.
but you.
Well, it's not. But anyways, yeah, that was like the first 5 minutes I said that. Damn. You know what? Maybe it's all my fault on that one.
No,
But
no, it's
anyway.
not. You're fine.
Oh yeah,
It,
thank
gi-
you.
it gives us something to discuss actually, and how system dictates play, right? So there's
Oh
another
yeah,
topic.
totally.
Again, the audience is already going to be building on like, damn, these guys are doing like 5,000 episodes.
They've already talked about 30 of them that they're already
Yeah.
doing it, and it's the first one. But yeah, anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed it. Uh, that's all of the time we actually have for now. Thanks for tuning in and taking the time to learn a little bit about ourselves. Next week, I hope you join us, and we'll talk about other various systems and probably rant about 5e in the end, as you've already found out. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.
Later.
Bye.